Morning, friends. Pull up a chair. You can always tell how important a celebrity believes they are the second the interview starts. It's never just them. It's the choreography. The handlers lean in. The PR lead has a pre-agreed talking points sheet. And somewhere on page 1, you're instructed, ever so politely, to mention the book, the album, the movie before the coffee cools. That's the dance, which is why Meghan Markle's sit-down with Bloomberg caught my eye. Credit where it's due. Emily Chang did her level best. Steady voice, soft smile, firm follow-ups. But anyone who's ever been in a green room knows what those silences mean. The glance to the side, the micro-nod, the producer in your peripheral vision. When a team is large, the room gets small. Every question becomes a negotiation. And when the stakes are that high, authenticity is framed, lit, and cleared before it's spoken. Now, I know you indulge me on the small things, like the tie. Thank you for the kind words. I always bring too many. Men spill, and you can't wear coffee. Also, if you're interviewing a political sort, you match the tie to the party. Lemon for the Lib Dems, red for Labour, blue for the Tories. It's not fashion, it's signals. Respect, in fabric, which is rather the point of today's story. Signals. Because beyond the friendly nods and talk of schoolgate chit-chat, all mums gossip, as Meghan quipped. There were signals in that Bloomberg conversation that spoke louder than the sound bites that made air. Signals about ambition, about timing, about direction. And if the production whispers are right, about one particular path that didn't survive the edit. Let's be frank. A lot of what we heard in the segment felt like warm porridge. Comforting, sweet, and unlikely to stick. I'm real. I have friends from when I was 17. Charming sentiment. Yes, but the internet has a long memory. And the public tends to ask, where are these friends at the biggest moments? And why can't we see the ordinary if ordinary is the brand? For those who remember the wedding guest list, the schoolgate line, or the vote, don't waste it bench moment with Harry, the narrative can sound like two radio frequencies at once, static and signal, which is why the alleged outtake matters. Because if you follow the signal, it points to politics. Here's what I'm told. The portion that didn't make the final cut veered into precisely the territory Meghan's team would prefer, framed carefully, if at all, her political ambitions. Not a shock to longtime observers. When the Sussexes crossed the Atlantic, there were letters to officials, phone calls with congressional aides, the sort of civic engagement that walks right up to the line of electoral advocacy. On camera, the line is always, "I'm not political." Off camera, it's more nuanced. The story goes that Meghan is still very much contemplating a formal lane. Congress first, perhaps, then the upper tiers if the wind is right, and the map is friendly. You can call it audacious. You can call it inevitable. You cannot call it dull. Admiration figures prominently in ambition. She reportedly looks to Hillary Clinton's endurance and to Kamala Harris's barrier-breaking ascent. Yes, critics will point out that Harris didn't reach the top on her own terms in the end. But in politics, paths are mirrors. You don't need to copy them to be inspired by the angles they reveal. Coalitions, narratives, the flashpoint moments that turn celebrity into viable. And if you listen closely to Meghan's recent public positioning, the entrepreneurial talk, the lifestyle aura, the real me refrains, they're not merely brand statements. They're pre-campaign pilot programs, proof of concepts for relatable but accomplished. Soft focus today, sharp elbow tomorrow. Why does this matter? Because television interviews are never just about the interview. They're about building an arc. If you intend to pivot at 40-something into the house, you first test vocabulary. Service, community, authenticity, motherhood, small business, mental health. You test posture. Less red carpet, more round table. Less glitz, more policy-adjacent specifics that don't box you in. You test whether the public will tolerate and perhaps applaud a duchess who also wants to be a Democrat of the ballot box. If the Bloomberg tape indeed contained a longer riff on elected office, and if that riff was trimmed, that tells you the campaign manager that doesn't exist yet is already in the room. Not to kill the dream, only to time it. Of course, any path like this requires a partner who is all in. Harry, by most accounts, is unfailingly supportive. Publicly, certainly. Privately, only they know. But observe the choreography, his memoir, her podcasts, his veterans' work, her platform building, their joint appearances at moments that read civic, not celebrity. If Meghan steps forward into a congressional run one day, she'll need the household aligned, the schedule ruthlessly managed, the messaging watertight. She'll also need to convert detractors. For every admirer who sees resilience, there's a critic who hears reinvention as calculation. That conversion, if it's coming, won't happen on a sofa with soft lighting. It will happen in town halls, at school fundraisers, under unflattering strip lights, where answers must be crisp and unscripted. This is where the authenticity claim runs its toughest marathon. Authenticity isn't the same as intimacy. It's consistency under pressure. In a campaign, you can't parachute in for the highlight reel and slip out for the harder questions. Voters in swing districts expect specifics. Tax credits they can feel, health care that arrives before the ambulance, schools that teach more than slogans. The Sussex brand has mastered the language of intention, impact, compassion, mental health. But politics demands the ledger of delivery. Who benefits? When? How much? How paid for? The pivot from awareness to appropriations is the steepest hill in public life. Then there's the matter of positioning. British titles and American ballots make a curious cocktail. Some will thrill at the symbolism. A woman of color, a global figure, turning that spotlight into legislative work. Others will balk at the optics. Monarchy and democracy, hand in hand. The smart strategy would be to localize ruthlessly. Pick a district where the issues are kitchen table and winnable. Childcare costs, small business permits, environmental protections that keep beaches clean, and property values steady. Spend the weeks in grocery stores and VFW halls, not green rooms. Build a ground game with volunteers who care more about potholes than paparazzi. In other words, let the electorate meet Meghan without the capital letters. If you're wondering whether the glossy enterprise, lifestyle ventures, entrepreneurial showcases, partnerships helps or hurts, the answer is yes. It helps if it becomes a bridge. Job training, women-led startups, practical toolkits for real households. It hurts if it reads as a gated community of wellness and candles, curated for applause rather than access. The pivot is to treat the brand like a district office. Open hours, measurable help, receipts posted quarterly. Do that for 2 years, and even skeptics begin to nod. She turned cameras into clinics, microphones into microloans. That's a story donors fund and voters forgive. None of this is to suggest that the road would be smooth. The opposition research file writes itself. Headlines, family rifts, the optics of privilege versus populism, every crisp photograph turned into wallpaper for attack ads. But every candidate has a file. What matters is whether the counter-narrative is stronger than the caricature. I've made mistakes. I've learned. Here's who I've helped in this zip code this month. That line, delivered consistently, starves the caricature of oxygen. And if there's one thing Meghan has proved, it's stamina in a storm. The question isn't whether she can take a punch. It's whether she can land one without looking like she enjoyed it. And what of the edit? The piece that, we're told, the audience didn't see. Perhaps it was prudence. Perhaps it was control. Either way, it confirms a truth anyone in media knows. The story behind the story is often the real headline. If the political chapter is penciled in for late 40s or early 50s, you wouldn't announce it now. You'd seed it. You'd let business become service. Let service become policy. and let policy become a platform only when the calendar and the polling whisper. Now, until then, you hold that smile, you repeat authentic like a mantra, and you trust the public to forget what they never heard in the first place. So yes, I give Emily Chang high marks. She asked more than she was allowed to, which is the job. And yes, I hear the chorus. All mums gossip at the school gate. Perhaps they do. Authenticity, however, doesn't come from saying the word. It comes from showing up where the gossip is cheap and the groceries are dear. If Meghan Markle truly intends to trade premieres for precincts, we'll know not from an edited segment, but from a Saturday morning when the cameras are late and the questions aren't friendly. That's where candidacy starts, not with a reveal, but with repetition. Until then, watch the signals. Watch the speeches edge closer to policy nouns. Watch the brand projects add measurable outcomes. Watch Harry's calendar bend to her districts. Watch the interviews. What's included? What's trimmed? What's teased as someday? You don't need a press release to see a runway being laid. You just need to notice where the lights are pointed next. And if the first female president is still a dream she keeps in her inside pocket, well, it's staying warm. Not on the record, not yet, but close enough to shape the next question, and the next room, and the next carefully chosen tie.